And we will wait until also the other speakers join, but I will start now. So welcome to everyone. It's 11:45, so we are starting this second webinar of our series. I am Pauline, I am your host today, and I'm from the Lifelong Learning Platform, which is an NGO based in Brussels. And we do have a lot of interest in the learning that takes place outside the classroom. And we believe strongly that volunteering is a very nice learning place and you can learn a lot. So now we are starting our second webinar of our series on valuing competencies in volunteering. And welcome to the participants that just joined us for this webinar, and welcome back to the others that attended the first webinar. From LLP, I will have the technical support of Maria. And so if you hear me call her and ask her to do something, you'll know why. And the main questions for us today is what is validation and why is it an added value for the voluntary sector? Hello, Pavel. And Maria, if you can launch the first poll for the second webinar. Okay, so the question is, how much do you know already about validation of non-formal and informal learning? And I will leave you around 10 seconds to answer. Okay, Maria, whenever you feel that we have gathered answers, can you show the results? Okay, so that's very interesting. So we have 1/3 who knows a lot. So we have experts on validation today. The larger share is that you know something about validation. So after this webinar, hopefully you will know more. And we have around 20% who don't know what it is. So for them specifically, I will define what is validation. So validation is the process of the identification, documentation, assessment, and certifications of competencies. And there are many initiatives implemented in the EU for doing this in the voluntary sector, and that's what we will hear about today. So I will now introduce the speakers. All of them are now connected. So to tell you about why validation is key for the voluntary sector, we have Pavel Trantina from the European Economic and Social Committee, which is a European institutions. And then we will have a presentation on the project ImproVal for improving validation in the voluntary sector by Eva. Hello, Eva. And then we will have Jo from the Netherlands, working at EDOS Foundation, who will give us examples of tools used in the voluntary sector and what are the strengths and weaknesses that was analyzed in the ImproVal project. And the final initiatives will be presented by Sabine Wiman. Hello, Sabine, from
Hello.
Based in Germany. And she will present to us the project JobBridge, and also LLLP is a partner in this project. And the last but not least, we'll have the chance to have also a testimony from volunteers, from Spain, who will tell us about how valuing his competencies was very useful for him. His name is Alfredo, and I will invite him to share his story during the open discussion. So I'm really excited to have you all here, and I look forward to your presentations. But before I leave you the floor, I will give again some technical indications. Sorry, I'm repeating from the first webinar, but in case we have new participants, it's important to mention. So I will invite you to introduce yourself in the conversation chat. So you can say your name and organization and the country where you come from. Make sure in the settings that you're sharing this with everyone. So to all speakers and all attendees. If you want to write a comment, you can also use the conversation chat. If you want to ask a question, I really recommend you rather to use the Q&A option, because other participants can vote for the favorite questions. And if there are too many questions, we will just allow the speakers to answer to the favorite questions. And we will grant the possibility for the speakers to answer one question following straight away the presentation. Otherwise, all the questions will be asked during the open discussion, so the last 15 minutes of this webinar. And also in the open discussion, if you prefer to speak orally, you can also raise your hand and we will unmute you. So you can ask your question directly to the speakers. So now I will leave the floor to our first speaker. So Pavel, you have a PowerPoint, and my colleague Maria will share her screen for you.
Wonderful, thank you, Pauline, and good almost noon to every one of you. Thank you very much for your kind invitation to open this webinar. I'll speak from my experience as a civil society organizations advocate and member of the European Economic and Social Committee, and someone who is really passionate about validation. Some of you already know that I always say that all I learned more through volunteering and working in a non-formal education field than what I have learned in school. And I always think of others who might not have such a chance, and therefore such a comparison between results of formal and non-formal education. So I always advocate for the validation, and I was lucky enough to have incorporate with some of you speakers and people in the audience on several projects in this field, and I'm happy to see the well-known faces to me. The title I was given for my intervention is Why Validation in Non-Formal and Informal Learning Sector. And I have 3 reasons for that. And I think this is the time to put on the slides.
I will wait. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, it seems that it started to be shared, but can you see it or not?
No, not yet.
Okay. So that will come.
Yes.
So anyway, I will continue, and it will show up at some point, hopefully. So the 3 reasons, because the validation recognizes the value of this kind of education or learning, of non-formal and informal learning. Secondly, it recognizes the outcomes of this learning for the learner. And thirdly, it recognizes the role of organizations who are providing it. So these are the 3 main reasons I would use.
Sorry, Maria, if you want to stop sharing your screen, I will try to share mine.
Let's see.
Because it's not working. Yes, so there you go. Oops, how do you?
Yeah, this is including my notes. Perfect. So once more, 3 main reasons, according to me. Validation recognizes the value of this kind of education and learning. It recognizes the outcomes for the learner, so the learner's perspective, and it recognizes the role of organizations who are providing this learning. So let's move on to the second slide. When I try to convince my colleagues in the European institutions, or in our committee, in particular those colleagues from the businesses and from the trade unions, about the need to validate non-formal education and learning, I operate with its value. And I stress that non-formal information and learning is complementary to the formal or school one. And I say we all continue learning besides or after school. So we need to constantly relearn and update our skills. But this is still quite abstract, isn't it, when I say it like this? So I try to simplify things a bit. I ask the employers, what skills do their employees need? There are actually many studies, including those that you can see on the screen on the right. Or we have a very good set of skills for the 21st century put together by the World Economic Forum, where actually the World Economic Forum highlights the need for competencies, such as critical thinking and collaboration, for character qualities, such as curiosity, initiative, and leadership, besides the traditionally mentioned foundational literacies that are taught in schools. So after asking employers about skills that they need, I ask them whether they think people really learn or develop these skills in schools. And they usually start to laugh. And they laugh until I ask them what they themselves do in order to equip their employees with these skills. And this is the best way to show the added value of non-formal education and learning, because it is something that you don't see until it is shown to you or explained to you. And only then you start to value employees and organizations that are developing their skills that actually they need from them. So this regarding the value of non-formal and informal learning, which is sometimes very invisible. But as you will see on the next slide, equally important is to ensure that employees or people in general are aware of their skills or competencies that they have acquired outside of school. Because only then they understand what an advantage or what an added value on the labor market it is for them. So let me give you just one example. It was exactly 10 years ago here in Brussels, actually just around the corner from my flat, during the European Scout Conference, when I learned about a very useful tool developed by the French Scouts, which is called Valorise-toi, or Empower Yourself. It is actually a simple checklist of skills developed by volunteers working with young people. But next to this, we have a translation of these terms into the language of employers. And this is really eye-opening. We developed a workshop about it, translated it into many languages, and the reaction of volunteers is always overwhelming because they suddenly become aware of their added value and of the ways how to express it to the employers. And today, as I said, we have many national translations of this tool available on the website. And of course, it is just one of many validation tools existing, developed through many projects that for sure you were involved in and that we are going to listen about today. Last but not least, on the last slide, we come to the recognition of organizations as providers of education. And this seems to be the hardest thing, because here you need to convince diverse audiences, sometimes very conservative, like the closed world of schools or politicians who tend to stick to what has been done in the past. But for that, luckily, we have official EU tools to begin with, namely the Council recommendation on the validation of non-formal and informal learning from 2012. And then processes which has to be introduced at national level. We have professional qualifications and ways how to achieve them, etc., etc. So when you as an organization decide to undergo comparison of your competence frameworks with the professional qualifications, or you get involved in developing new professional qualifications like we did in the Czech Republic, we know it is painful. It takes a lot of time and efforts, but it pays off. And at first, it requires to convince the leadership of your organization. And in the end, you get the recognition. You are no longer an NGO just playing with kids, for instance, during their free time, but you are a provider of meaningful education and a developer of skills. And you can build on it. You can really have the benefits coming from. So these are my basic arguments for why validation of non-formal and formal learning is important and beneficial for recognizing its value for the society, for the individuals, and for organizations working with volunteers. And I'm very much looking forward to listening why it matters to you. So thank you for your kind attention.
Thanks a lot, Pavel. It was very interesting. Great. So now I have retrieved the access to my computer. Is there any question that you would like to ask? I see there are some comments. If you want to raise your hand at this point, you have the chance to ask Pavel directly a question. Otherwise, we will leave the questions for the open discussion. And I will now ask our next speaker, Eva, to perform this presentation of the project ImproVal for improving for the validation sector. And you will be sharing your own screen.
All right, now I think you can see my screen, and I hope you can hear my voice as well. My name is Eva, and like Pauline said, I come from Finland, from Civis Study Center. And this is such a pleasure to be here today and to be ready to present some of the greatest outputs from our ImproVal project. Civis, a couple of words from my organization. We are an educational institute that is specialized in working with voluntary organizations. We train the professionals working in different associations and NGOs so that they can, for example, provide better training for their own volunteers. So that is what we do, and that is also the way where we have gotten quite a lot of expertise on validating volunteer skills. Yes, today I'd like to share with you the outcomes, the outputs that we have been working on for the recent 2 years with our Improving Validation in the Voluntary Sector project. There are actually 3 outputs existing, and today I will focus on 2 of them. There will be a webinar next week on Monday where we will focus on the 3rd one, so I'll only share a couple of words with that. So, what did we want to improve? What is this improving validation word combination? Where does that come from? We wanted to improve the understanding of skills gained from volunteering. Like the previous speaker very nicely put, there are so many skills that can be gained from volunteering, and like we heard, it is very possible that there are some skills that can be gained only through volunteering, so that formal training might not give us all the skills that is needed. And we also wanted to create a wider knowledge on existing validation tools. The one that the previous speaker briefly told us about, Empower Yourself, that is one example of a great validation tool, and I bet not all of us have heard about that, but we should, and that's something that we wanted to stress. We sort of guessed that there are lots of validation tools already existing. All partners in this ImproVal project had been part of some previous projects where these validation tools have been created, and we knew that we weren't the only ones. So we just wanted to sort of put an end to that, all those developing projects, and start focusing on the tools that already are there. We also wanted to get more knowledge, more information on what kind of benefits and challenges there are in validating skills. So when people are using these tools, does it benefit them? Does it benefit the volunteers? Does it benefit the organizations? And is there room for improvement? Also, we wanted to widen the ways where people and organizations are using the outcomes of validation processes. And the last thing that we wanted to improve was to give more, maybe some tangible tools or words to be put in mouths when we are trying to influence on policymakers to make skills from volunteering scene more known. And that is the policy paper. I'll explain only briefly, and we can focus on that in the later webinar. So the first output I'm going to present you is a tool collection. So that's what we did first. And that's something that was, well, as you know, in almost all this kind of projects, there are tasks spread to different partners. In our project, there are 5 of us, 5 educational institutions and civil society organizations from Northern and Central Europe. So my organization, Civis, is the coordinator here. We have Lifelong Learning Platform, who is hosting the webinars here today. We have University of Bamberg from Germany. We have EDOS Foundation from the Netherlands, and from Slovakia, I need to look down, Platform of Volunteer Centers and Organizations. We call them the platform. And we all have sort of a different view on volunteering and on validation. So I think this combination was a great combination for providing material, providing networks for this kind of work. Yes, so the tool collection, that was led by our Slovakian partner. And we did a desk study, desk research, searched the internet, reached our networks in different European Union countries, and tried to find as many validation tools for volunteers as possible. And that work took about half a year total, or a couple of months to collect them, and then a couple of months again to create an analysis of them. So we got quite a lot of statistical information on the validation tools. I'll show you a great infographic on the most important findings. So we found 49 tools total, and out of them we took 45 tools into the statistical analysis. And we talked quite a lot about what are the most important qualities in these tools, and how should we present them to the audience. What would be the reason, or how would people want to look for a suitable one for them. And we thought that the language is the most important, or the first step where people are getting involved in these tools. There are 22 languages available, so that's quite a selection. And quite a lot of these tools are made in projects, so they might be many languages. One tool can be used in many languages, and 6 of the tools were considered European Union wide. So they were made for many languages and in several skills. A majority of them can be used online, 61% of them, and mostly they are aimed in a situation where a volunteer wants to validate their skills for work. But also personal development was very important in them. And you can find the tool map or the list of tools on our project website. That's www.improval.eu, and there's results section where you can find the tools collection. And also the statistical analysis is as a PDF document. It can be read and downloaded on our website. There were 8 countries in the European Union where we couldn't find any tools. And we thought why that might be, and there are at least 3 reasons. One is that we just didn't find them. They exist, but we didn't find them. If you see any tool that is not on the list, you can add it, or you can ask us to add it. So there's a form in our website at the end of the tool list where you can put the information that you want and send it to us. And we'd be happy to get more information from you. And the second reason why there might not be tools for validating volunteer skills is that there just aren't any, because in a certain country, the situation might be that it is not yet thought that volunteers might get some skills to validate. Or a third option is that perhaps in some country, validation tools for volunteers don't exist because there are other tools to validate many kinds of skills. And I think that is the reason why we didn't find that many tools in Finland, for example. There are lots of tools for validating skills, but only a couple which are aimed to volunteers. So I think that a good thing what we found during this mapping is that these tools exist. They are of good quality. They consider many steps in the validation process, so they are pedagogically very well thought. But the not so good thing is that it was extremely difficult to find information on who is using the tool, how many people are using the tool. And that kind of made us worry that maybe the thing is as we expected, that after a project, the hard work kind of is left behind. And that's something we really don't want. The second output I'd like to share with you is our small-scale study. So we wanted to find more information on how these tools are perceived. Do they benefit the organizations? Do they benefit the volunteers? And this study was led by our partner from Germany, University of Bamberg. And we have written a short article on this matter, and it can also be read, downloaded and read in our website. And I know that in EPALE platform, there also are some translations from our partner languages, which can be read there. So we had 2 questionnaires and expert interviews where we gathered this information. The questionnaires were aimed at volunteers and voluntary organizations, and they were targeted to volunteers and organizations which have experience in using a validation tool. And also these volunteers and organizations were in our partner countries. So the target group was sort of small. And we knew that there is a risk that we don't get that many answers. And unfortunately, that's something that kind of happened. It was especially difficult to reach the volunteers. And that sort of also brings up a question that all the tools that exist, do they have users? But we did get some answers, and they were quite interesting. So the difficulties that both volunteers and organizations found, what is difficult in validating volunteer skills? That was the question. The competencies, how to identify them. How to identify them from outside, or how to self-reflect them. That's something that is quite difficult. Also, lack of time is quite obvious obstacle. There's lots of things to do in a voluntary organization, provide training, take care of volunteers, or the volunteers themselves. They might have to or have an opportunity to work or study, and then they volunteer, so that just takes their time. What benefits have people gotten from validating skills or using a validation tool? These, quite interestingly, differ from each other. So volunteers thought that the way that they can use the certificate, or what they get from the validation process, they can use it for getting a new job or getting a better job. That's something that they consider very valuable. But the organizations didn't really find combating unemployability that important. So work and improving their chances to get a job was very important to volunteers, but not that much to organizations. So the third output I've been referring here to is a policy paper that will combine our experience and our knowledge from what we have done the past 2 years. That will be targeted to policymakers in the educational sector and also voluntary organizations themselves. And these recommendations will be published soon. You're able to comment on the paper if you have been signing up to the webinar on 22nd June. A warm welcome. If you haven't done it yet, please do. And we also still like to know how to make the validation tools more and more known, how to increase the usability, how to help volunteers and organizations with the difficulties they faced. And one thing that we have found very important is that even though the tools are very of good quality, there still needs to be more possibilities to compare the outcomes of validation from different tools. And even though we know and it's widely acknowledged that the skills gained from volunteering are important, that's still something that we need to fight, or at least keep discussing. So here's my presentation on ImproVal project. Please ask questions in the questions and answers section, and maybe we'll get back to these questions at the end of this webinar. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Eva. So if you have any question targeted to Eva, you can ask it now. If you want to raise your hand, we can unmute you. Otherwise, I think your questions in the last slide were very interesting, and I think we can discuss it further during the open discussion. We can, of course, share your PowerPoint presentation as well as the links, so you can find all the tools available on the ImproVal website. So if you go on tool collection, you can search for the tool by the language. And also in the results section, you will see that there was a previous European project called VNFIL, and they created a European map. So there you can look for the tools you're interested in by clicking on the country. And we are right now updating this database as well as part of the project. And so it was great for your presentation, Niva, because now with this project, we have this real overview of all the tools in use in the European Union. And I invite all the audience to check them out, check what tools are in use in their country, in their languages. Now with our next speakers, Jo Peters, we will see more concrete example. 3 concrete examples or tools that are quite well used in the European Union. And Jo, I will leave you the floor now and I will share your presentation.
Great, thank you. As Pauline, as Pauline said, my name is Jo Peters. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm representing EDOS Foundation, and one of the missions of EDOS Foundation is to promote and introduce validation in the voluntary sector in the Netherlands. The voluntary sector in the Netherlands is well organized, but validation is pretty new for most of the volunteer organizations. As Eva and Pavel said, there are many validation tools for volunteers in Europe, and most of these validation tools have been developed in projects under Erasmus Plus or under the previous program, the Lifelong Learning Program. We have been involved in some of these projects, and what we discovered at a certain moment is that people keep reinventing the wheel. People start to develop or to test a portfolio for volunteers, not knowing that already a similar portfolio has been tested and developed in other countries. We made an overview of all projects dealing with validation in the voluntary sector, and we found that there are more than 25 projects dealing with validation for volunteers. So we thought, well, maybe this is a waste of time, a waste of energy, and a waste of money. So that's why we started the UpVal project. UpVal stands for Upgrading Validation, and it's more or less a follow-up on the ImproVal project. The ImproVal project is almost finished. The UpVal project just started, and we only have, at the moment, we only have the first outcome to share. But maybe that's also a very interesting project. Next slide, please. Yes. What we did is first, as already said, there are many validation tools. First, we tried to find out which are the most successful validation tools in Europe, validation tools for the voluntary sector. Successful in the way that many people are using it. And for many tools, people don't know how many volunteers are using it, but we found out that 3 tools are used by many volunteers in the country. That's the VNFIL in Romania, that's the Passeport VNFIL in France, and that's the Europass certificate for volunteers in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, at the moment, around 700 volunteers have received this Europass certificate. In Romania, around 700 volunteers have received the VNFIL certificate, and in France, more than 60,000 copies of the Passeport VNFIL have been distributed. So what we have done is compared these 3 tools and looked at what makes them successful. And then we look at 3 levels. So the volunteer, because that's the main person in everything that we talk about. How can the volunteer benefit from the tool? how can the organization work with tool and offer it to the volunteer, and how can a volunteer center or a volunteer platform, that's different in every country, support the organization. These are the three levels that we are looking at. As I said, next slide, please. As I said, the first part of the work has been done. That's the comparison of the three tools. And we have analyzed the strong and weak points of these three tools. Here you see some of the strengths and weaknesses of the French tool. And now I will share in the chat room a link where you can find the whole report of this comparison. This is the French tool. Then next slide, please, the Romanian tool. Yes, that's more or less similar to all three tools are more or less similar. They are a kind of a portfolio-based document, either on paper or online or a combination of it. And then the next slide, please, that's the Europass certificate for volunteers that has been introduced by the Dutch Europass agency, and it's also used in the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium. It is used in the Czech Republic, and it will be introduced after some holidays in Slovakia. So it's spreading. And what we are going to do based on the comparison of these three tools is we are, yes, okay, that's good. Yeah, fine. We are going to develop guidelines for the voluntary sector on how, if they want to develop a tool for a validation tool for their volunteers or for their organization, what can we learn from these three successful tools? In this way, we hope that we can contribute to avoiding reinventing the wheel. Because, yeah, as already mentioned, there are many projects, there are many tools, and sometimes people start from scratch, not knowing that something similar already exists. As you see here, we have partners from different levels because the voluntary sector is also organized on different levels. And in the guidelines that we want to develop based on the research that we did, we want to focus on all these four levels so that every volunteer organization that wants to work on validation can get some support on its own level. That's, yeah, and next slide, please. So the first output is ready. You can find it on our website, and the next output will be what we call so far the roadmap for validation. And the roadmap is the first step in the roadmap will be the volunteer who asks himself, what kind of validation, what kind of volunteering would I like to do, and what would I like to learn from it? And the last step will be, how can I get my skills validated? And there will be some steps in between. So there will be a roadmap for the volunteer. There will be a roadmap for the organization. How can we support the volunteer in this process? And there will, and then as a third outcome, we will develop probably a manual or a training program for volunteer centers. How can we support the volunteer organization in the validation process, or how can we introduce it in the volunteering organization? Last but not least, we will make an overview of transversal skills to help the voluntary sector to connect with the sector of formal education and to connect with the labor market. That will be the last output of this project. That's it for the moment.
Thanks a lot, Jo, for this very interesting presentation. I know that the Europass for Volunteers is actually really a tool that is expanding in the European Union. So you mentioned Slovakia is now working on translating it, and it's available also, I think, in Belgium, in Flanders region, and in Czech Republic, maybe. Yes, yeah. So it's any organization in any country can be in touch with you, or the contact that you would give to translate this. It's not very hard. It's just a document that can be translated and used in other languages. And so if you want to know more about the tools that were presented and its strengths and weaknesses, you can check the reports that you shared the link for. And we will also give you updates about this ImproVal project. So when you were registering to this webinar, I asked you if you wanted to receive updates on validation in the voluntary sector, and if you ticked yes, then you will receive many updates, among which there's the ImproVal project, the ImproVal project, as well as now we will hear about the Job Bridge project. So thank you, Jo, for your presentation, and I will now leave the floor to our, not the last speakers, but the last European initiatives on the validation of non-formal and informal learning. Sabine, the floor is yours, and you can also share your screen.
Yeah, thank you, Pauline. Yeah, thank you, Pauline, for inviting me to this webinar. I mean, we have heard a lot about valuing competences and volunteering already. And yeah, many things that I have heard, I carefully listened, of course. And thank you, Eva, Pavel, and Jo for whatever you said to validation. I will add another tool. Maybe you can put it in the list, because I've seen in Eva's list, it's not there. Because what we developed is not developed in volunteering, but comes really from the non-formal, informal learning sector as a whole. But let's start at the beginning and not in the middle of my presentation. Okay, so my name is Sabine Wiemann. I'm representing an adult education institute based in Göttingen, Germany. I've been working in educational projects for the last 22 years. All the educational projects that we have seen over the last 22 years, starting from Socrates, Joint Actions, LLP, and whatever that was there. And yeah, we started in 2005 to develop a system to validate competences, social, personal, organizational competences. We have heard from Pavel quite some examples for this kind of competence that we looked at. And we started from an active citizenship training approach. So we had a project where we had to look at how to evaluate the effects of non-formal active citizenship training. So quite a vast concept. So we felt it was already to define what is active citizenship with Turkey and Bulgaria and Romania and Spain was quite interesting. And then we started to look at a tool that we could possibly use to look at the effects, so the competences that people would develop in these kind of activities. And we started, yeah, with a system that then became level 5. So the current name is level 5 now. And it has been developed and still is in the development, because we're always trying to add new things to adapt to different contexts and environments. It has been implemented in various validation projects dealing with mobility, with internships, with volunteering, with learning in European projects, and yeah, you name it. So really a quite vast range of applications there. And the last one, and the first one that actually dealt with volunteering, was VALE, the Validation System in Lifelong Learning Experiences of Youth. There we put a focus on needs and tested how our level 5 system would work in volunteering with young people with a disadvantaged background. And from there, we further developed the whole approach in the Job Bridge project. And that's a project that I'd like to talk about. I'm also glad to have partners from the project here. So it's Pauline, of course, obviously, but we also have 3 people I've seen in the list of in the audience from volunteering matters. So hi guys to UK. There's James, Una, and Piotr I've seen in the list. So we are all working together in this Job Bridge project, and the name is quite evident. I think it means really making the bridge between volunteering and the job market. So how to make competences visible and capitalize on the competences acquired in volunteering for the job market. That's really the idea. And the core is really this validation here in the project. So how can we evidence the competences in volunteering? And we use level 5 for this purpose. And yeah, the partnership is quite big, I think, with 8 partners from 7 countries. But I'm glad because the partnership really shows the complementary expertise. So we have partners that have worked with validation or that are volunteering organizations. We have the employer's perspective also in the project from the Chamber of Commerce. So that's really quite nice. And we have also an HR company in the project, so we can cover quite a wide range of perspectives here. Okay, so, and we, as all European projects, we also, of course, did a research to start from in order to explore the state of play of validation in the volunteering sector. And I think I don't need to repeat everything that has been said before, because many things that we found out, obviously, you found out yourself. So many things will repeat here, but maybe I just pick out some of the things that I find really interesting and maybe worth mentioning again. We heard before that, of course, validating competences is something very useful also in terms of finding a job after the volunteering, be able to make proof of what you've learned. But what we found in our research was that only 1 out of 10 volunteers would do volunteering for professional reasons. So I think that's quite interesting. Most of them don't do volunteering for like finding a job more easily later on, but really for other reasons than for professional reasons. But half of them would use a certificate in their job search. So I think that's quite interesting. I think for the benefits, I don't need to say anything more because that had all been said from my previous colleagues here talking to you. Also the challenges and barriers, I think we have heard. Of course, there's maybe lack of interest, but I think it's almost more, or the cases that there's a lack of resources, a lack of support, maybe also a lack of know-how, and also a lack of knowledge about what tools are actually there and how can I use them in a meaningful way. What we found was that apart from the use pass, there are hardly any well-known tools that are known in the volunteering sector. So this is what we found in our research. That is, by the way, based on more than 1,000 responses in an online survey and 92 interviews with experts in the field, including also employers. So I'd like to say that. And what we also found out was that there's a lack of awareness about the European competence framework, which I think is also quite interesting because, I mean, if you do volunteering or you do validation, it's also interesting to look at what are the key competences, for example, from the European framework of key competences or the digital competence framework or the intercom or whatever there is. So also there's little knowledge in the volunteering sector about these frameworks. And last but not least that I'd like to mention is, of course, that most employers consider positively the fact that someone has done some volunteering, but also there's no common line, let's say, in terms of what is the kind of certificate that would be accepted by employers. So this is the main findings. Let's see. Let's say from our research, of course, we have a very nice research report that you can read on our website, the JobBridge website. It's all there, all the data are there in quite high detail, and you can find more information there. So what did we do then with this research, let's say? The first thing is, of course, there you see the nice report on the left side, the stock ranking report. And what we did also in the survey and also in our interviews was to ask our interviewees, or also in the online survey, what are the competences you think are most relevant in the volunteering sector. What kind of competences do you acquire? And we have like 23 competences that were named, let's say, there. And we develop a competence framework out of these 23 competences and a training. So, and that's the middle here, the training, which is really focusing in how can volunteering be a means to increase job readiness, and how can you make the volunteering experience really like a learning experience, not like, okay, we do volunteering, but how can you plan it in a competence-oriented way so that you can really also focus on this learning side of the volunteering. And what is the validation and the link to the labor market? So there's a lot about validation, introduction to validation, what it is, how it can be done. And then there is an introduction and also a lot of material on how we can use the level 5 system that we have developed for assessing competences and evidence in competences. Level 5 has also a software and can generate a certificate that show the development of competences, because I think what is quite special about level 5 is that you can see the development. So the idea is that you do an assessment at the beginning of your volunteering and at the end, so you can see really the potential of development of the person and not only a performance on a certain day or whatever. So that's the idea. And the idea also was that after the training that we actually also implemented just before Corona, I'd like to say, that was in mid-February, we had a training with 22 people in Göttingen, and they were trained on all these topics that I've just mentioned before. And the idea was that they would implement our idea to validate and to competence-oriented learning and volunteering in learning projects. And these learning projects, you can imagine, are suffering quite a lot about COVID, but I will talk about that in a minute. So, and the training is also available for all of you. So it's there, it's an online training now. You can also gain a badge, a digital badge, and become a serie facilitator, so with our training. And what we also will develop are educational guidelines that will show how you can plan your volunteering experience in a competence-oriented way and how to validate the competences. But that will be finalized over the next months. And yeah, as far as validation is concerned, we use level 5 here. You can see just some bits and pieces from level 5. We have this competence framework with 23 competences. It's a cycle, let's say. It comes a bit of the plan, do, check, act circle here from the idea. And for the volunteers, they can get, of course, a level 5 certificate and have their competences evidence. But on top of that, we also have developed a learning app based on Moodle, which is quite easy, I think, to use. So also for people that are not directly involved in a level 5 procedure or whatever, they can do it. So whoever is out there and wants to gain a Savvy Volunteer badge can do that, because it's available for all Android and iOS systems in the normal Play Store, and for iOS it's the App Store. So yeah, as I mentioned before, effects of COVID-19 for us were quite heavy because the envisaged learning projects can simply not take place, or only very few of them, or our very inventive colleagues, for example, from Volunteering Matters, but also Pauline, I'd like to say, you have really very nice ideas and alternatives, because they are doing quite a lot of virtual activities instead, and of course they are feasible, they are possible to do. But the learning projects that, for example, we have planned are just simply not possible. And we searched for alternative, have launched some calls, let's say, on diverse German social media and asked people, hey, are you doing some volunteering? Are you interested in having your competence and competences evidence in our project? And we have just 2 people that said they would be interested, but better 2 than nothing. So there is something happening, but not as far as much as we had hoped to achieve. And also for this reason, we invented this learning app, so the digital badge, the Savvy Volunteer, in order to reach out a bit more easily. Because level 5, you need, of course, someone, you need a project around, whereas the badge can be used just for everyone who is interested in using it. And yeah, what's coming now is that we need to do our assessments. You can see here the level 5 certificate on the right side. So that's the level 5 cube that shows the competence at the beginning of the volunteering. Hopefully competences evolve and then you get a bigger cube. So these are the 2 assessments. We have to do the second assessments in some of the cases. We will of course write up reports and have case studies, and this will all be fed into the educational guidelines. And last but not least, I'd like to mention we have launched a European award, and I really like to invite you to hand in an innovative project in the volunteering sector that looks at how competences can be validated. You can win a trip to Brussels, hopefully to our final conference. We don't know yet whether it will take place or not, but at any rate, you will win a prize and you will get your project disseminated all over Europe. So you'll gain visibility with your project. So, and last but not least, we will also organize day 1 courses on the job bridge approach based on the Moodle offer that you can already benefit from when you want. So I think you will share the presentation, Pauline, so you get the links and whatever you need to access also the course. I think that's it. Yeah. So if you have any questions.
Yes, so if you have any question, you can raise your hand now. So to raise your hand, I think you have to open the conversation chat and you will see the icon. Well, if you have questions that arise later, you can always send me an email and I will put you in touch with one of our speakers today. Before I open the discussion to everyone, first, thank you very much, Sabine, for this great presentation on the Job Bridge project. I really encourage you to have a look at the e-learning platform. If you have a tool that you're using, even if it was identified, for instance, in ImproVal, you can participate to this award.
Absolutely, whatever tool you use, yeah, share it with the world and submit your entry for our European award, really.
It can be a tool, it can be a method. So for instance, if you're using role playing and you have way to kind of document it for the award, you can also apply. If you have a platform, I know in France, they had a platform for volunteers to register the skills based on the tasks that they were doing, and then they could apply to a job directly on the platform. So that would also be valid for the award. So feel free to share the call for the awards to other organizations or volunteers that you know of. And if you're all volunteering at the moment and would be interested to try out this level 5 methodology and to see where you stand for specific competencies. So let's say you want to assess how you've been developing your group facilitation in the past months. And with participating in this Job Bridge pilot, so I just shared the link to register for this experience. You will be assessed on your development of group facilitation, and we will follow up on you, what task have you been doing and so on, and also give you the access to the e-learning platform where you can learn much more about validation of competencies, what are methods, innovative methods that we are using. In portfolio, it was mentioned. We heard about tools. But there's a lot more like observation, role play, peer assessment, group assessment, etc., etc. So really the Job Bridge have really gathered all this information on these tools and approaches. I see that now we have a question, but before we answer the question of Jorge, I will ask another volunteer whose name is Alfredo to take the floor. And Maria, please, can you enable Alfredo? Yes. Alfredo, can you unmute yourself? You want to share your story. How did you value your own competencies? The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. First of all, I would like to share with you my volunteering experience in Scotland, and I was working with young people who have disabilities. And my job was to arrange outings with them. We went to play in go to the swimming pool, and I was as a befriender for them, and I was like a real friend or a best friend. And when the coronavirus started, I returned to Spain, unfortunately, and I was working remotely, managing different volunteers to help in these crisis times. And also I was teaching Spanish to English people, and also as well I am maintaining my relations with the young people through chats and different apps to talk with them. So I would like to summarize my main competence that I developed during my time in Scotland, mainly, and also during my time here in Spain remotely. First of all, I would like to divide the competence into professional competences and also personal competence. Personal competence, I would say independency, because I was living in a flat with another from Colombia, and it was my first time outside of my home and without my parents, and also I had to manage my own money, to maintain my house cleaning and tidy. So yes, I gained a lot of independency, and regarding the professional competences, I would say ability to work in a team, because each week I had meetings with my manager, and we arranged my schedule for the week, to talk about the boys or problems. So we work together to arrange the outings with the young people, and also the main competence, I would say, problem solving, because sometimes the befriender have to decide what activity to do, because of the weather. For example, the weather, it was awful, or it was I don't know, dangerous for the young people, or maybe choose the activity because the young people, the young person suffer outings, and it's difficult for him decide what type of activity. And finally, I would like to say, I think that I improve my interpersonal relations with the young people, with my managers, and also with my flatmate. And yes, I would like, yes, I improve different relations during 6 months in Scotland, and now with my managers directly, and also with my Spanish students. So it was a very rewarding experience, and my managers also think that that I did a good job, and they have been trusting me. So I am very happy with my experience, and that's it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Alfredo, for sharing your volunteering experience. You also in the little chat we had a few days ago, you told me that you're studying law, so of course problem solving and perhaps teamwork also can be applicable in your study and your career. And I also heard that you were working with volunteering matters. So we had a speaker from this organization in the first webinar, that you will soon start your e-portfolio. So that's very nice that you have acquired all these competencies, and that you're already aware without having gone through already validation about all these competencies. And thank you very much for sharing your experience. I saw in the meantime that there was a question, and I see that you already no, who answered? Sabine answered. So we have 3 minutes left. Maybe a general question that is kind of in line with the one that Joost asked. It was what is needed to give the validation tools a really broad application? Where is the key in business with the government, in recognition with the voluntary organization and the sector? So it's a long question with many aspects. My question would be to our speakers before we close this webinar, how to make these validations more widely known in the European Union. And I will leave you 30 seconds each to answer this question. Perhaps Pavel, would you like to start?
Thanks. How to do that in 30 seconds? I think most important is to show what's the value of the validation for the individual, because then actually they will follow and they will start to discover what's the right validation tool for them, because it also depends on what do they want to do the validation for, whether it's for the job, whether it's for their personal growth, and stuff like that. So you definitely need to start with the end user, that means a volunteer.
I see there was also a question to Alfredo that I didn't see before. Alfredo, James asked you, do you think your experiences will help you in your future career and personal skills gain?
Yes, I think that it's regarding experience, professional and personal experience, and I think all the experience outside of your country, of your residence, it's also always regarding and a good experience for your employers. And also, I would like to share, for example, to the last week, I contact with I am a lawyer, and the last week contact with me English law firm, for example. And the first thing that they told me that it's the main thing curriculum, it was that I was doing a volunteering project, and that said about me that I am a commitment person, so they can't trust on me that I don't leave the project, because they are offering me a type of similar that yes, it's a good experience, and also I think the even experience volunteer a lot of competence and personal skills that we can recognize for the companies. Thank you.
Okay, great. So now we're a bit running out of time, but maybe I will leave our speakers if they want to say just a few words to end this webinar, perhaps answering my previous question that I didn't have a chance to ask. So Pavel, do you want quickly to say a few last words, perhaps?
Just my appreciation to all the projects being presented, because they are aiming at the same thing. That means bringing various validation tools together. And that's a very good effort.
Thank you, Pavel.
Maybe can I say just something to responding a bit to your question? I mean, it's a jungle there. If you look at the validation tools that are out there, look at the inventory of validation tools that is published continuously by the CDFOP. I mean, how can you know which one is the one that is made for you? So that's one thing. There are too many, everyone is cooking his own or her own soup because everyone thinks mine is the best. So I think we should not see each other as competitors, but maybe unite forces. That would be one thing. And I think then recognition is key. Who says that my tool is the good one? But I think also in the sector, whoever uses a validation tool, and that's the experience that we have made over the last 15 years, people are not ready to invest time. They want validation with good results, valuable and valid results, but they don't want to spend too much time. It should just come like this. And this is something that does not work. I mean, people should be aware of the fact that if they want to have good results, it will take some time. It's not done in a second. So I think that's really the problem that I can see from the field. So yeah, and let's not consider each other competitors, but really network more and then find the tool. So yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Savin. Eva, do you want to say a final word?
Final word sounds so, you know, final, but I think that your question, Pauline, was really interesting. What to do next, or how to keep the wheels rolling. And I think that it's, well, all about individuals. So what Pavel said about we need to make the volunteers speak up how they have been using the validation tools and what kind of skills they have gained. Maybe I'm a bit biased because of my own professional network, the NGOs, the voluntary organizations, but I also think that we need to really focus on the individuals working in the organizations, so that they really appreciate all the time that is needed, as Sabine said.
Yep.
And also I think that if we can convince all the voluntary organizations that this is definitely something that benefits them as well, the tools get more recognition and more use.
That's true. true. It helps with the recruitment of volunteers and the quality of the volunteering experience, and really to think in terms of HR and training opportunities. So, I mean, that's what I heard talking with volunteers and volunteering organizations. Thank you. And you, the final word. I mean, I will be the final word because I have still something else to say.
Well, I think the most important thing is let's stop reinventing the wheel. Let's look at what is already there and how can we adapt it instead of starting from scratch again. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So I would like to thank you all to the speakers who contributed to this discussion today, and also to the audience for the attention. I also forgot to mention that thanks to your participation to this webinar, you will receive an open badge, a digital badge. It's kind of a certificate of participation, but a bit more 2.0 somehow. So you will have the opportunity to discover this this afternoon on your email address. If you're interested in seeing how the politics can change to favor volunteering and competence recognition in volunteering, because this is something we left out a bit of the discussion today, but also policymakers, when they have interest in volunteering and in the validation of learning acquired in volunteering, they can also support existing tools to kind of scale them up. And they need to give financial support and so on. So how can we, as organization, especially at European level, influence the policymakers to improve the recognition of competencies in volunteering? And this will be discussed in the third webinar. So I encourage you to join us. It will be on the 22nd of June, next Monday, from 3:30 in the afternoon to 4:30, and you can still register with the same link that you registered for this webinar. So I encourage you to join. We will present a policy paper where we have listed a few recommendations for improving validation in the voluntary sector, and it will be also presented by Jo Peters, and there will be discussion. We have a representative of the European Commission also who will tell us what they think about our recommendations. So thank you again to everyone. I was really amazed to see that many participants today, and looking forward to next week's discussion. Have a great day and have a great week. Goodbye.
Thank you so much, Pauline.
You're welcome.
To all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.